Hey everybody, this is NPC Chris from the NPC Cast. You're listening to the Game Master's Journey, and I just want to wish Lex a happy 100th episode. For hitting that milestone, you can add 1000 XP to your character sheet. Good job.
Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Greetings, fellow GM and or player. Welcome to episode 100 of Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker, and I'm transmitting to you today from the Obsidian Monolith somewhere outside time and space. Thank you, NPC Chris, for adding to the show today. And listener, if you haven't done so already, definitely go check out the NPC Cast. I will have a link to that awesome podcast in the show notes for episode 100. So this is a very special episode today. Not only is it the first episode of season 6 of Game Master's Journey, but it's also my 100th episode. So I decided for episode 100, I'm going to depart from the regular format of the regular episodes and celebrate the show and celebrate you, the listener of Game Master's Journey. So if you're a new listener to this show, welcome to Game Master's Journey. I will tell you that this is not how most of the episodes are. This one will probably be a little bit longer than normal, and I've got a lot of feedback and whatnot for this episode. So, if this is your first episode of the show, this isn't the best example of what a normal episode of Game Master's Journey is like. But I've been doing this show for a while now, and I thought it would be great for episode 100 to do something special. So Game Master's Journey was born on February 2nd, 2015. This show is an evolution of an older show I did, a Cypher System podcast called GM Intrusions. And I began GM Intrusions on October 19th, 2013. So in a sense, this show has been going for about 2.5 years now, with over 160 episodes total. Now, I've grown a lot as a podcaster, a gamer, a game master, not to mention as a human being in that time. So this episode is dedicated to you and all the listeners of Game Master's Journey. I really appreciate all the feedback, support, and community participation that you so generously provide. I put a lot of time and work into the show, but it's you, the listener, that really makes Game Master's Journey the awesome podcast that it is. So I put out a call on the last episode and also various places online for feedback from you for this 100th episode. So to each of you who sent feedback, whether that was in the form of audio or sending me an email or sending me a message on Google+, thank you so much. Not only did you provide a lot of content for this special episode, but you've also given me lots of good ideas for topics for season 6 and beyond. I also wanted to thank the other RPG podcasts who submitted the awesome drops that you're going to hear throughout this episode. And please check out these other shows. I will have all of them linked in the show notes. And you can find the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey. So I want to take this opportunity, speaking of other RPG podcasts, obviously Game Master's Journey is not the only RPG podcast out there. So if you are an RPG podcaster or YouTuber or blogger or publisher, writer, whatever, reach out to me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. I am happy to check out what you're doing and to let the listeners of this show know about what you're doing and what you provide. The Game Master's Journey community is awesome, and we are just part of an even larger community of RPG enthusiasts. So I'm happy to let my listeners know about the other great sources of RPG goodness that's out there. And I hope that you will return the favor on your show, blog, channel, whatever. And I think that most people who listen to podcasts listen to more than one. And most people who watch YouTube watch more than one channel, and most people who read blogs read more than one blog. So there's no need for any kind of sense of competition among us. We all provide great content, and we all have our own unique points of view, experiences, and approaches. So I put out a call to all other RPG content providers to generously cross-promote one another. And I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I've already been doing this, but I'm going to continue to do it. So again, if you're doing something out there RPG related, let me know, and we can help each other out. Now, I want to let you know that in season 6, I am bringing segments to the show. I used to do segments in GM Intrusions, and I really enjoy doing them. Up to this point in Game Master's journey, it's been more freeform and less structured, but I decided for season 6, I wanted to try doing segments with this show. I won't do every segment on every episode, and the frequency with which I do a given segment will jointly depend on just my inspiration and what I'm inspired to do for that segment, and also feedback I get from you. And I will be talking more about the segments that you can look forward to in season 6 later on in the show.
This is Michael from the RPG Academy podcast, and you're listening to Game Master's Journey. We wanted to congratulate Lex on hitting 100 episodes. Keep up the good work, and here's to 100 more.
Thank you for that, Michael. Thanks for contributing to the show today. Really appreciate it. And if you haven't checked out RPG Academy podcast, go check them out. I'll have a link in the show notes. So this is a new segment that I'm going to do on maybe every episode, maybe not every episode. Let me know what you think of this segment, the campaign update segment. So I am playing RPGs myself, running RPGs myself. And this is something I've done here and there on Game Master's Journey and in GM Intrusions, but I thought I would make it an official segment. This is where I can just kind of tell you about what's going on with me in my RPG games, and where I can discuss the campaign that I'm running. So a big focus of this show is being a game master, and part of what I do on Game Master's Journey is collect all the wisdom that I can share with you about how to be the best game master that you can be. And of course, the best teacher is personal experience. So this is a chance for me to tell you about what's going on in my game and anything that I maybe learned from it. So at this point, I have finished the 3rd session of my Curse of Strahd campaign, and I'm actually live streaming that campaign on YouTube Live. So you can find a link to my YouTube channel in the show notes. And every Thursday at 3:30 Pacific, we stream. So you can come watch the game live, and you can chat in our chat channel and hang out with the other people watching the game. And then I take those and I edit them and put them up for posterity on my YouTube channel. So if you can't see it live, or you'd rather see a more edited version, usually within a few days of the session, I have the videos up, so you can check those out. And it's also nice, you can get caught up if you're coming into it. Because like I said, I just ran this 3rd session. So, you might want to start at the beginning. So we've concluded the Death House adventure at this point, which is an optional introduction adventure in Curse of Strahd that is designed to take the player characters from level 1 to level 3. And then the main campaign starts at level 3. So you can either, just start your players off at level 3 and run the campaign. Or if you want to start at level 1, you can do Death House. So we've completed that, and the PCs are now ready to explore Barovia. I wrote a blog post about running the Death House adventure, and I'll have that linked in the show notes too. So beware of spoilers in the blog post. So if you're going to be playing in Curse of Strahd, or you think you might be, then definitely don't read this blog post, because this blog post is for dungeon masters who are running or going to run the adventure. So in a nutshell, the Death House adventure can be very deadly as written for a party of 1st level characters. Now, as the adventure is presented, the player characters gain level 2 partway through the adventure, and then they gain level 3 when they complete the adventure. So if you just run it as written, depending on how big your group is, how experienced your players are, how effective their characters are, how well they work together as a group, whether or not they have, all their bases covered as a group, it could be fine, or it could be really difficult, or you could have a TPK, a total party kill on your hands. So if that's not something you want, especially if you're a newer GM or you have newer players and you're concerned that this adventure might be a little bit too much, what I did is I took the encounters that are going to be especially deadly and I retooled them so that they're a little less deadly. So again, this is mainly for newer DMs or DMs that don't have a lot of experience with 5th edition. If you're an experienced DM, then you can do this on your own. You don't need me to fix encounters for you. So I wrote that blog post, but then what I ended up doing for my game is I actually started the characters at 3rd level. So I have 4 players and the characters are a fighter warlock, a bard, a wizard who's a blade singer wizard, and a ranger. So I just started them at 3rd level, partly because some of the players really didn't want to start at 1st level. And I didn't really want to start at 1st level. I've run enough 5th edition that me personally, I don't really need to start at 1st level anymore. 1st level is kind of like a training level. I see 1st level in 5th edition as being there for new players to kind of ease them into the game. So, if you have players who are new to role-playing games or new to Dungeons and Dragons or new to 5th edition, then 1st level is a great place to start. But if you have players that are experienced with 5th edition, personally, I prefer to start at 2nd or even 3rd level minimum. So I started them at 3rd level, and then they got level 4 when they completed this first adventure. And that actually worked really well. I ran all of the encounters pretty much as written. I didn't dial anything back. And they were able to handle it fine at 3rd level. And those encounters that I think would have been deadly for a 1st or 2nd level party, they were able to handle them. And I didn't have to, put the kid gloves on or pull any punches as a DM or anything like that. And it wasn't too easy for them either. It wasn't a pushover at all. There were definitely some tense moments. I had PCs go down to 0 hit points. There were 1 or 2 times that it looked pretty grim, but they succeeded. And the adventure was, quote, fair in the sense that they had a decent chance of success as long as they played smart, which they did, and as long as the dice didn't go against them too badly. So, if you're running Death House, that's even a simpler way to approach it than, the fixes that I put in my blog post where you have to kind of redo some of the encounters, is just start your PCs at 3rd level. So I do plan to do an extensive review of Curse of Strahd in a later episode of the show. And I'm also going to review it on my blog. But I want to get a little more experience with the campaign first before I do a full review. However, my first impressions are that it's an excellent adventure. It is definitely the best official 5th edition adventure yet. And I want to point out that, we're told that it's an adventure for characters level 1 to 10, and that's potentially true. However, the way the adventure is set up, it's more open-ended. So the level that the PCs end the adventure at will largely depend on how your players approach it and what you as a DM determine are the milestones of the adventure. So Curse of Strahd recommends using milestone XP, but it only gives you some vague guidelines on what those milestones should be. It doesn't tell you, here's all the milestones of the adventure. That's up to you as a DM to decide for yourself. So it's going to very much be up to you to determine those milestones. And in that way, you can kind of decide for you and your group what level you want the PCs to be at when they end the adventure and how difficult you want various parts of the campaign to be. Because, depending how many milestones you come up with or where you put those milestones will drastically affect how difficult the campaign is and what level the PCs are when they end it. And then another side of it is part of it will be on the player's shoulders as far as, how much of the content do they actually do, because the adventure is very open-ended. So, they could skip whole parts of the campaign, which is going to mean that they're much lower level when they end it than if they went and did every little thing they could do. So this is one of the multiple reasons that I consider Curse of Strahd not well suited for new or inexperienced DMs. However, if you're a fairly experienced DM, it is pretty easy to set the leveling pace exactly where you want it to be. And again, I will discuss this more in depth in a later episode. So yeah, that's where we're at. We're this next week we're going to do our 4th session and having a lot of fun with it. I'm really enjoying Curse of Strahd, and I'm really looking forward to getting deeper into the story and seeing what the players do with it.
Hello, Internet. It's Kevin Loaded Dice from the Loaded Dice Network, but you may know me as Cal Maverick, captain of the Spruce Banther from the Whiskey Rebellion. Game Master's Journey is my favorite podcast on the Citadel. Shit, wrong sci-fi. We do Star Wars. Well, here's to your success. I love the podcast. May there be 100 more episodes. Cheers, Lex.
Thanks so much, Kevin, for helping out with the show today. That's great. Thank you so much. Kevin has a great sense of humor, as does everyone on the Whiskey Rebellion podcast. So definitely check that out. It's a Star Wars actual play podcast, and it's really good stuff. And also check out all the podcasts on the Loaded Dice Network. And I'll have links to those in the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. So this is my listener feedback segment. I get a lot of great feedback from you, the listener, and I love to share it on the show. And I've got a lot of feedback today because I asked for feedback for the 100th episode. So my first letter today is from Matthew Hayden. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Matthew, who's from Melbourne, Australia. Hi, Matthew. Hello, Australia. So awesome that got some listeners in Australia. And he sent me a great message on Google+. Matthew says, "Hello, Lex. I just wanted to say that I love your show, Game Master's Journey. I only started listening about 2 weeks ago, and I'm up to episode 70. Wow." So he started at episode 1 and got to episode 70 in 2 weeks. Matthew, you got to be sick of hearing my voice by now. Holy cow. I've referred my whole gaming group to your site, most of whom are new players. Thanks, Matthew. That's awesome. I really appreciate that. We have a similar journey with RPGs. Briefly, 1st edition AD&D, a couple of games, lots of 2nd edition and 3rd edition, no 4th edition, a few games of Pathfinder, a bit of 3.5, Storyteller, mainly Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse, West End game Star Wars, and all of the Wizards of the Coast Star Wars. Yeah, that's almost exactly my portfolio of played games. The only difference there is I never actually played Werewolf, and I played a little bit of the Wizards of the Coast Star Wars. I played a little bit of the first D20 Star Wars that they put out. I ran a little bit of it, but that was it. Matthew goes on to say, Numenera looks awesome, but I haven't bought it yet. Most of that time was GMing over 24 years. Matthew goes on to say, I only have one bit of advice. Please do not talk yourself down. I think you're as qualified to give GM advice as anyone, and certainly more than most. Every episode, I learn something. I think, hey, I do that, cool. Or I could do more of that. Or I need to start doing that. I think overall, you're very informative, and I wanted to start listening to a podcast to improve my GMing, and I found you straight off. Thanks for your hard work, Matthew from Australia. So thank you, Matthew, and I really appreciate that. And it's funny, I was talking, I've talked with my wife about this quite a few times. She agrees with you that I'm maybe a little too humble on the show sometimes. And, it's a fine line to walk. There's a lot to be said for humility, or at least you don't want to be arrogant, right? Or full of yourself, but you can definitely go too far with it. And, Matthew, you're not the only one to tell me this. You're not the only one to tell me not to sell myself short. And, so I'm going to try to do better in the future, be a little bit more confident about the advice I give. And, we can always just keep in mind that this is just my experience, my perspective. As they say, your mileage may vary. So, I do the best I can to give the best advice I can. And I am definitely not a perfect GM. I'm sure I'm not the best GM, but I have been doing this for decades. And I've learned quite a bit along the way, as much or more from my mistakes as things that have gone well. So I'm happy to share that with you all. I also heard from listener Steve Strickland, who is also my Tier 6 patron. So I really appreciate Steve and his input. And he's also playing in my Curse of Strahd campaign. So Steve says, just wanted to say grats on hitting episode 100. Not a lot of people do so good a job on that. You can always talk more about making a non-armor wearing cleric. Just kidding. Who wants to hear about weird things like that? Well, I don't know, Steve. So listener, you tell me, do you want to hear about non-armor wielding clerics? And just a little context there. One thing I plan to talk about in season 6 is I plan to talk about the cleric in D&D and probably other games like D&D, like Pathfinder, maybe even 13th Age and other fantasy RPGs. But in a nutshell, throughout my gaming history, going all the way back to first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, people are always reluctant to play clerics. In fact, I feel like if I had a perfect memory, I could sit here and on one or two hands count the number of clerics I've seen played at a table I was at, whether I was the GM or a player. I have some ideas about why that might be, but I was really expecting that to go away with 5th edition, because as far as a mechanical class to play in the game, clerics are awesome now. And I always thought that one of the big reasons people didn't play clerics in the past was because they just weren't a great class to play. But they're awesome now. Clerics are, I think, one of the cooler classes to play in 5th edition, but I still don't see a lot of people playing them in my games. So I have some ideas of why that might be, and I have some ideas of things I can do to address that and make the cleric a more attractive option. So I've been kind of asking people, why do you think people aren't playing clerics? And so Steve said that for him personally, he doesn't play clerics because they wear armor. Steve likes to play characters that don't wear armor, like wizards and monks and things like that, which I totally understand. So he's like, if you can come up with a cool cleric variant that doesn't wear armor, I'd be all over it. So, I don't know. That's the first time I've ever heard that, but it could be that a lot of people out there agree with Steve and feel the same way. So let me know, if you're someone that's like, I'd be all over the cleric if they didn't wear armor. Let me know. I'd be interested how many people feel that way.
Hi, Lex. I started listening to this podcast out of the blue this last summer while doing yard work. I became hooked on the discussion and thoughts that others put into their gaming. Soon I had a note started on my iPod typing in everything people were saying, which is now turned into a document on my computer to keep everything organized. Now here I am almost a year later, and I am still getting great ideas to unleash on my own games. And the best part of your podcast is compared to many others? While many have great discussions, actual play, and interviews, few others do I finish listening and feel the dire need to get out and play some RPGs. And while I included ideas in my email for what I like and what I would like to hear more of, I just wanted to say, keep up the good work, and here's to another 100 episodes.
Thank you so much for that, Thomas. That's awesome. Great feedback. Thank you so much. And Thomas also wrote in. He wrote in on Google Plus and by email. Thomas gave me a lot of great feedback for the show. So I'm going to share some of what he said to me by Google Plus and email. So he says, just thought I'd say a quick thank you for all the cool ideas this podcast and community has presented so far. I started a new Numenera game today, and by the end of the first hour, each character had 2 secrets. one that the PC came up with, and one about their neighbor. Each character had a first adventure that they knew about, and each character had a connection to another PC through that first adventure. We also used the 5th edition storytelling ideas to establish what all the characters are looking for. And we threw in a skill based off of the background for each character. And we also created icons for the city and nation and the world, and everyone bought into them. That is awesome. So it seems like Thomas has gone through the archives of Game Master's Journey and GM Intrusions a little bit, it sounds like. And it's taken a lot of the ideas that I and guests have presented on the show, and he just threw them all into his game, which is awesome and is a perfect example of what John Marvin and I were talking about in episode 99 about how, you can take ideas from these different games and use them all in whatever you're doing. Thomas goes on to say, all I need now is a bigger list of GM intrusions to pick from, and I don't think I'm using the icon rules from 13th Age correctly, but the players loved the day. Thanks, Lex. Thank you, Thomas. And I sent Thomas a link to the comments of a GM Intrusions episode. I ran a contest way back when, and to enter the contest, people submitted GM Intrusions. So hopefully that was helpful. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes too, in case any of you are interested in GM Intrusions ideas. And also in most, if not all episodes of GM Intrusions, I gave an idea for a GM Intrusion at the end of the show. Some of those I came up with, and some of them listeners submitted. So lots of ideas there as well. So in the email that Thomas sent to me, he gave me some great feedback as far as things that he likes about the show, things that he dislikes about the show, and things that he'd like to see more of. And, all of this feedback that I'm sharing today, what I'm really hoping is that you will get a hold of me and let me know things that you agree with, so people are giving me ideas for ways to improve the show. And if you hear one of these ideas and you're like, yeah, I'm totally on board with that, let me know, because if a lot of people want a certain thing, then I'm probably going to do that thing, right? Because I want to make this show, as good as it can be. And I want it to be, as helpful to you as it can be. So here's some ideas, or here's some things that Thomas likes about the show. He says he likes the actual plays, whether they're mine or someone else's. He says, I enjoy listening to them and gathering role-playing ideas and seeing and hearing how others do it. Your games are especially good. I also enjoyed the Loaded Dice actual plays. So there you go. Let's see. He says he struggled with Knights of the Night, which is another actual play podcast, and they do a lot of different systems because they have a very different play style than his. So, that's something, with actual play is, you may get more or less from a given actual play, not necessarily because it's good or bad, but just, how well it fits what you're looking for in your own style. So, if you're out there looking for actual plays, to get inspiration or get ideas or learn from another GM, and you try one and it's just not doing it for you, keep looking, because there are a lot of actual play podcasts and YouTube channels out there, and, everybody's got their own style. So keep looking. And I think chances are really good you're going to find a group and a DM or GM that, really jives with you and that you can really learn from. Another thing that Thomas likes is great ideas from other systems. So taking an idea or a concept from one system and applying it to another. And, he says again that he still doesn't quite grasp icons from 13th Age. Now, I'm pretty sure Thomas sent this to me before I released episode 99. So Thomas, I hope our discussion about icons in episode 99 helped you out. If not, Thomas, let me know. And if there are specific questions you have about icons in 13th Age, or, things that you're specifically confused about, let me know. I'm sure John Marvin's going to be on the show again. And, if there's still things that you're fuzzy on, maybe we can go into icons again and answer those questions. All right. Dislikes. He says he doesn't really have any. That's awesome. That's great. Thank you, Thomas. All right. And things Thomas would like to see more of. Okay, now this is a really good one, and this is something I definitely want to cover. He says he wants to know more on how to hook players at the table without trying too hard. He says, I understand setting up the rules and norms, but some GMs have a masterful way of creating an atmosphere so that when the game starts, nothing needs to be said, but everybody is in. So yeah, that's a great idea, how to hook players into your story and your campaign. Thomas would like to see product reviews, especially of products that can cross systems. I still don't have any plans on playing 5th edition anytime soon, but my 5th edition DMG goes with me to every game. That's awesome. That's awesome. I did an episode way back in the beginning of the show about, actually I did a few episodes about the Dungeon Master's Guide from 5th edition and how I think it's a very useful resource, even if you don't play D&D. And I've heard from quite a few people that agree with that and use it, even though they're not playing D&D, which is awesome. So again, any of these things, if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, I want to hear more product reviews, let me know, because I'll definitely kind of prioritize things based on how many people want that. And also, if there's a specific product you want to hear about, let me know. Or, if there's something like the 5th edition DMG that you found, maybe it's from a specific game, maybe it's not, but you found that it's very useful in all the games you run, let me know about that. GameMastersJourney@gmail.com. Let's see. Thomas also says, you used to offer inspirational readings for games. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I'm not the most avid reader, but it is because my time is so limited and I don't want to commit to a book that isn't good or that I feel I will suffer through. I usually read off of recommendations, especially those related to RPG games, fantasy and sci-fi with a good story, etc. So yes, Inspirations is coming back. So that's going to be one of the segments that I will do in the show, probably not every episode, but when I find something, whether it's a movie or a TV show or a book and it inspires me, I will let you know about it. And finally, Thomas says creating exploration and social encounters that leave a lasting impact. So yeah, another great idea for an episode, series of episodes. Great stuff. So Thomas says, thank you so much for the great production and content. My time is limited through the week with teaching, performing, gaming, being married. So this is the only hobby podcast I really have time to digest fully, and it is a good one. So thank you so much, Thomas, for all the feedback. I really appreciate it. And I'm really encouraged and flattered that, with your very limited time, that this is the podcast that you listen to. That's awesome. Makes me feel good and feel like I'm doing something right over here on the Obsidian Monolith. So listener, let me know if you like any of these ideas that Thomas put forward. If you want to see these things too, let me know. Shoot me an email, GameMastersJourney@gmail.com. And, if there's things that lots of people want, they'll definitely go on the short list to be done sooner rather than later.
Hi there, Lex. DM Nell here. As I record this, I am riding around in my Candy Apple Red Monolith, and I wanted to congratulate you on your 100th episode of Game Master's Journey. You do an excellent job of putting out the podcast on a consistent basis with good content that's interesting and entertaining. So please keep up the good work, and hopefully we'll be listening to your 200th episode before long. My favorite episodes are your world building ones. So I wanted to throw out a couple of ideas on some topics for you to cover in the future. One idea would be around NPCs. How do you create them? How do you make interesting and memorable NPCs? How do you make iconic NPCs? So who are your Mordenkainens and Elminsters of Primordia? Who is your Grey Druid? Who is your Lich Lord? To steal the icons from 13th Age. And since we're talking iconic things, how about some ideas around creation of iconic magic items and artifacts? Do you have an Excalibur in Primordia? Is there an Ark of the Covenant or a Stormbringer that may be found somewhere in those mysterious lands? So just some more world building. You can't have enough of that for me. Anyway, that's all I have to offer at this point. I need to land this monolith and get back to work. So again, congratulations, and look forward to hearing some more from you.
Thank you so much for the feedback, DM Now. Really appreciate it. I get a lot of good feedback from DM Now. Let me tell you, I am a huge fan of the world building episodes myself. I could do world building every episode. Honestly, it's one of my, it's one of my favorite things to talk about on the show. It may be my ultimate favorite thing to talk about on the show. And what excellent ideas, sir. Just listening to your message, I was taking notes because your ideas, who's my Elminster? Who's my Mordenkainen? What's my Excalibur? What's my Stormbringer? Those are such great ideas. And I wrote back to DM Nell, and, the thing I've been facing with the world building is, we hear people talk about writer's block all the time, where you're writing or world building or doing something creative and you just the ideas just won't come. You've just got nothing. I don't have that problem. I've got tons of ideas. My problem is more writer's paralysis, where, you think about it, building a world is such a huge undertaking. And anytime I sit down and I'm like, all right, I'm going to work on Primordia, there are just so many options of just things I could do. Like, what am I going to work on today? That I feel like a deer in headlights sometimes. And I'm just paralyzed by all the options and choices. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know where to start. So one thing that is super helpful is when people say something specific, like what DM Nell just said. I want to know about some of your iconic NPCs, who are the Mordenkainens of your world and things like that, because that's something I can take and I can say, okay, who are the Mordenkainens in my world? And I can work on that and it gives me a focus. So I am putting out a call to all of you, if you're into the world building and you're into Primordia at all, if there's something specific that you want to know about, let me know. And then that's something I can work on and I can do it in a future world building episode. I can talk about it. And I actually put a thread up in the Primordia subreddit just for this. So I will put a link to that in the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. And you can head on over to Reddit if you've got ideas or requests of things you'd like to know more about when it comes to the world building and Primordia. I got a great email from Zeroth Zion. I hope I'm saying that right, from Montreal. And yeah, I guess I'll just read it. Hello, I'm Zeroth Zion from Montreal, and I wanted to thank you, Lex, for the wonderful podcast you keep producing. Also, you can be proud of your great work and prolonged dedication that we appreciate so much. Wow, thank you. That's awesome. I'm humbled by that. Thank you very much. As recently as last week, I've been devouring more than half of them while working at the office, and I must say you inspired me into looking at my game, our game, more seriously than ever before. I really appreciate the house rules you present as they are very original. Thank you. Now, someone else that's powering through the archives, man, you guys are dedicated. That's awesome. I know how it is, though. I'm the same way. I find a new podcast I really like, and I will just binge listen to everything they've got until I get caught up. All right. Zero Zion goes on to say, I myself have been tinkering with a custom system this last year, melding interesting mechanics from games like Ars Magica, Anima, Beyond Fantasy, World of Darkness, Legend of the Five Rings, etc. because like you, I was bored of the time-wasting and immersion-breaking metagames brought by Pathfinder and D&D. Ironically enough, I bought the Cypher System rulebook 1 week before stumbling upon your channel, and I would like to thank you deeply for having hyped the system like you did. I now believe the Cypher System is actually the best RPG system, as it is as simple as it is adaptable. Yet it is robust enough so that it can be twisted infinitely with new mechanics in order to provide a game for any type of audience. So you are welcome, sir. I'm glad you're digging the Cypher System. And I know I haven't talked about the Cypher System a whole lot on Game Master's Journey, but that's mainly because I did a whole podcast, GM Intrusions, all about the Cypher system, specifically Numenera. So, if you're a new listener and you're into the Cypher system and you want more on that, go check out GM Intrusions at starwalkerstudios.com. I've got 60, 70 some episodes all about the Cypher system, and it's pretty evergreen content and some highlights over there. I've got an interview with Monty Cook, Bruce Cordell, Shauna Germain. So if nothing else, check out those episodes. You get to hear from the horse's mouth all about the system. And yes, I agree. It is very adaptable because of its simplicity. It's very easy with the Cypher system to do your own thing with it and come up with things, even on the fly and play, come up with a new monster or whatever. It's very easy to do. So Zeos Zion also has a few topics he'd like to see covered. How to handle a campaign with multiple groups of PCs and rotating GMs. That's interesting. I don't really have any experience with that. And unfortunately, probably never will. I could see something like that happening during my college days, but now I just don't foresee, unless maybe someday if I can actually retire, maybe then, but I don't see myself ever having the kind of free time for gaming that I could have multiple groups of PCs going on at the same time. And I asked him for some clarification what he meant by this. And what he's talking about is having one gaming group, but having the players make basically more than one adventuring party. And you kind of go back and forth between these multiple parties with different things going on. I think it's an awesome idea. I think it would be really cool to do. But again, unless you're in college or maybe high school, I don't know that anybody has time to do that. Because if you're only playing once a week, like what I do, and you've got multiple group, that means like, say you have, say 2 different groups of characters, then you're only going to be able to do something with each group like twice a month. So it's going to take forever to advance storylines, it seems like. So I'd love to talk about that, but again, I don't really have any experience with it. And he also mentioned having more than one GM running respective campaigns. Now that's something I've had a tiny bit of experience with that. Way back when, in my college days, I was running a Changeling the Dreaming campaign that went for years, one of my longest running campaigns. And I didn't have a co-GM or storyteller in that game. I didn't have a co-storyteller for the whole campaign, but there were 1 or 2 or 3 gaming sessions that I did. One of my players, his name was Kurt. He was actually the person that kind of taught me how to DM back in the day. He was in my group and he was a game master and a very good one that I learned a lot from in the early days. And so I had a couple game sessions where I had him come on as kind of a co-GM role. And he had a player character in the campaign. But one of the specific sessions that I did that, or actually I think now I think about it, every time I did it was basically like a dinner party. And I had this idea of a scene or a sequence of scenes I wanted to run where basically the noble changelings of the area had a dinner party where, all the nobility was there. A lot of the commoner changelings in the area were there. And it was completely a role-playing thing. And I wanted, this to be an opportunity for the player characters to interact with the other changelings in the area, to be able to interact with some of the movers and shakers in the changeling society. And as I was putting this idea together, I realized, this is going to be really rough for me to do by myself, because I've got dozens of NPCs that I want to play. And, if I do it all by myself, we can only do one thing at a time. So I asked Kurt to help me out. And basically what I did was I gave him some of the NPCs to play. And, I told them, told him kind of like, this is what I've got as far as the NPC's personality and kind of what they're about and how they act. And this is kind of their agenda, what their goals are and whatnot. And then let him play those characters. And basically what we did was I was in one room of the house and Kurt was in another room. And that way we could have two role-playing scenes going on simultaneously. And so the players could go from one room to the other, depending which of the NPCs they wanted to talk to. And then every once in a while, Kurt and I would get together and compare notes. And that was a lot of fun. And, if you are in a situation where you want to do a scene like that, where you've got a lot of NPCs interacting with each other as well as interacting with the players, having someone help you with the GMing is a great way to handle that. And what's probably would be the ideal is if you have a friend who's a good GM that who isn't actually part of the group that can come in and help you during that particular session. But, even if, like Kurt, they're a player character in the group, they can still help you out. So that's been my experience. I've never had a campaign I was in where there were, more than one GM the entire time. There definitely be some logistics to overcome with that, but I think it could work. It just depends what you're wanting to get out of the campaign and, how much time you and this other GM have that you can get together and plan and compare notes. Cause that's the thing is, kind of look at how much time you spend preparing for your game sessions as a GM. And if you're going to have a co-GM, I'd say probably at least half of that time you need to be spending together. It seems like. So, that's another thing, kind of like having the multiple groups of PCs, the logistics are pretty sizable for that. There's definitely some difficulties to overcome just getting together and having the time to be able to do it right. But if you can do it, I think it would be really cool. Another cool way to do that, if you want to experiment with it, and I think I've talked about this on the show before, is in the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. They have an optional way to run the game. I think it's called like the Gods Must Be Crazy or something like that. But the idea is that everybody at the table is a GM and you take turns being the GM. So at any given time, there's only one GM. But what you do is everybody in the game makes a player character and everybody is a GM. So you start out and let's say I start out, I'm GMing the game. And I have my player character who right now is an NPC because I'm the GM. And the idea is not only can you change GMs between sessions, but you can actually change GMs in the middle of a session. And they actually had, I think, a system to it where you had these plot points you could spend where basically one of the other players, I'm running, and one of the other players says, okay, I want to be GM now. And so, boom, now that person is the GM, their player character is now an NPC, and my NPC is now a PC that I'm playing, and you just switch, you can switch in the middle of a combat even. So that is something kind of crazy. I think it'd be fun to try for a few sessions. I don't know if I'd want to try building a whole campaign on that because I don't know how well it would really work in practice. In theory, it sounds kind of cool. But for something like that to work, you need a group where you all know each other really well. You're all, fairly strong as GMs and you're all comfortable being the GM. And you also need to agree on a setting, right? So one way maybe you could do that is to run in a published setting, like say Forgotten Realms. And then, you all as a group agree with how closely you're going to stick to canon and how much you can kind of do whatever you want. Or the other way you could do is a homebrew setting, but then you all have to be comfortable with each GM being able to declare things within the setting. So if you've got a setting you've been working on for a long time that's important to you, you may not want a bunch of other GMs, mucking around in your sandbox and changing things around. So I think, the way I kind of thought of it, if I ever did this, would be we would build a setting together from scratch. And then that way, none of us are really attached to the setting. And it's, the setting belongs to all of us from the very beginning. So that could be interesting, but I haven't tried it yet. All right, so back to Zero Zion's email. He says, again, I'm really glad I found your podcast. Listening to the advice of a GM as creative and free-willed as yourself. Oh, thank you. I'm glad I'm free-willed. The alternative would suck. Made me realize tabletop RPGs really aren't about the rules, but about the emotions our game feeds to the players at the table, including us as GMs. Seeing the game in this way, especially after listening to your episode about stop being a lazy GM, gave me the spark of wanting to master that art again. Take care and stay awesome. So thank you very much for that. That's high praise. That really makes me feel good to hear that what I'm doing here is inspiring people to GM and inspiring people to kind of take a step back and look at themselves as GMs and evaluate and find ways to not only, be a quote better GM, but to get more out of it yourself, and that's really important because I think a lot of us as GMs, we get very focused on, are the players having fun? And we're all about, making the game fun for the player, but the game needs to be fun for us too. And if you're not having fun as a GM, or you're not having enough fun, that's when you're probably going to get burned out. And that's when your campaign is going to die, because it changes from something that you look forward to doing every week that's fun and recreation for you. It changes into a job. It changes into something you have to do every week and something you kind of start to dread. And I've been there. I've been there more than one time in my life where I'm in a campaign and that change happens and it starts to be, instead of looking forward to game night, I start to be like, oh God, I got to run my game tonight. And it's not a good place to be. And if you are in that place as a game master, I would definitely stop and think about what's going on, think about what you're doing, and think about how you're feeling and ask yourself, why have I lost that loving feeling for the game? Where has it gone and why? I was having so much fun. Now I'm not. What's different? What's changed? And try to figure out what it is that's kind of burst in your bubble as a GM and see if there's something you can do about it. And for me personally, it's been a lot of different things. There was times in earlier days, like running D&D, where things got out of control. I let the player characters get too powerful. Maybe I handed out crazy magic items, or I gave them these, house ruled abilities that I'd come up with. And I just wasn't having fun anymore because it was so difficult to challenge the player characters because they were so overpowered that I wasn't having fun anymore. And, unfortunately, I was a lot less experienced as a GM and just a lot less confident and grown up as a person, that it kind of led to the death of the campaign, where now I think, or I hope, that if I realized that was what was going on, I'd be like, well, I just need to get rid of these magic items, or I just need to take away these crazy abilities that I've given the PCs so that we can get to a point where I don't have to try so hard to present adversaries that are actually something other than a face roll, So, that's something I had to learn the hard way. So, if you're feeling that, if you're feeling like, I've lost the loving feeling and I'm not sure why, try to figure out what changed, because something changed somewhere that led to you feeling this way. And once you figure that out, figure out if there's a way you can fix it or change it, and if you can't find something specific, maybe just take a break. Just tell your players, hey, you know what? I'm getting burnt out. I need to take a break. Let's take a week or so off and either not play, or maybe one of you can run a one shot or a short thing, and then you can play for a while, which can recharge your batteries. And, I've often found if I'm playing in a campaign, I start getting excited again about my campaign that I'm running. and I start wanting to run it again. So a lot of times that can work. And maybe you might find yourself in a situation where, you're like, hey, I need a break. Does someone else want to run something for a while? You have another player step up and say, yeah, I have this idea of something I could run. And maybe you're thinking it's going to be a short-term thing, but now this other GM is digging what they're doing. And maybe you can start going back and forth and say, 1 week I run my game, the next week you run your game, and we just alternate. And then you each have 2 weeks to come up with your next session. And, that can do a lot to help you not get burned out because you have more time to prepare. You're not having to run a game every single week, and you're getting to play too. So maybe try that. So again, a lot of great ideas from Zero's Zion here. So if you're digging some of these ideas, let me know, and I'll see what I can do about talking about it more on the show. All right. I got a message from Steve Ela, and I think I'm saying that right. I know we've gone through this, Steve, but I can't remember. I hope I'm saying it right. Who says, congrats on another successful season of Game Master's Journey. Thank you. Here are some thoughts on segments for the next season. So Steve's got ideas for segments here. One he's calling On the Shelf, where I talk about new RPG products that are now available for gamers. New RPG source or splat books in particular. I always hear about a book long after they come out, and I figure you have better access to the information. I actually don't. Believe it or not, I don't have any special access to any RPG companies. I wish I did. I wish I got advance notice about things that were coming out and things like that. That would be super cool and would make doing something like this a lot easier. But let me know if you want to hear about, RPG products. I'll see what I can do. Unfortunately, a big limit to this is just money. Sometimes I can secure review copies. Wizards of the Coast has been really good about giving me access to review copies of supplements that they put out. But, I've reached out to other game companies and they've said no. So, if the game company isn't willing to give me a review copy, then if I'm going to review the thing, I have to buy it. And I'm not rich, nowhere close to that. So in just brutal honesty, if I'm going to buy an RPG product, I am not going to buy an RPG product to review it. I'm going to buy an RPG product because I want that product for myself, for my game. And then, I may review it if it's something I buy that I like, but I'm just not in a position economically where I can go buy things just to talk about them on the show. Now, if there's something specific that you want me to talk about, let me know. And I can see, if the publisher will be willing to give me a review copy or not. And while I'm on this topic, I also want to give a shout out to Engine Publishing. I've reviewed some of their products on the show, which they were willing to provide for reviews. So I really appreciate that. And also, I'm blanking on the name of the publisher right now, but the publisher of the encounter cards that I reviewed on the show a while back, those were provided for my review. So shout out to those guys and Wizards of the Coast for doing that. That's awesome. Definitely helps. All right. So other ideas for segments from Steve, Take My Money, new Kickstarter, Indiegogo type references, maybe a list of ones that are at least 50% funded to trim down the list a little bit. Kickstarter is so big, it's hard to sort through it all. With your contacts in the industry, you probably have a cleaner list than most people could come up with. Again, I wish that were true. I really don't have contacts like that, other than some third-party publishers who I just know personally. People like John Marvin, Ryan Chaddock, Andreas Walters, that I've met mainly through GM Intrusions because they were publishing Numenera stuff. And so those guys are usually let me know when they have a Kickstarter going, and I try to pass that along. They also are really good about sending me review copies of the things that they do. So, but other than that, I don't really have contacts, believe it or not. But yeah, that's something, if people are interested in that, that's something I can try to do. And you know, if you're doing a Kickstarter that's RPG related, you can always let me know about it, and I can go check it out. You know, I want to say one thing though, when it comes to reviews, and this would include things like Kickstarter, is I have a rule that I've had since GM Intrusions, when I did the Star Walker review segment for GM Intrusions. And my rule is I will only review a product that I really like. And I broke that rule once, and I got more than a little flack for it the one time I broke it, which was when I did my review of the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games. That was a fairly negative review, and I heard about it. There were some people that weren't happy because I did a negative review. The reason I have that rule, it's a personal thing. I'm not saying that people shouldn't do negative reviews. Everybody can do whatever the hell they want. But for me personally, there's a few reasons. First of all, I want to be positive. You know, there's so much negativity in the world. You know, it's like the thing on the internet to bash things. It's almost uncool to just like something and say good things about something. It's like, if you want to be cool on the internet, you got to be nasty and negative all the time. And I don't want to be like that. And it's easy to get sucked into that, you know? And maybe you see that in my Star Wars review. Maybe I got sucked into the negativity. You know, you start out, I'm trying to do a balanced review, but it's overall negative. And once you start, you know, talking about something you don't like, it can easily become a rant. And so I just don't want to be negative. I'd much rather spend my limited and valuable time talking to you about something I really like, that I think you should go check out, that I think is worthwhile, than to spend that time talking about something that I think sucks or just isn't very good, or that I'm just kind of meh about, you know? And another part of it is, you know, there's the adage, any press is good press, right? So, you know, if I take a look at an RPG product and I'm like, this is terrible, but then I go talk about it on the show, I'm giving that product press. And why on earth would I want to promote something that I don't think is any good? You know, because some people will go look at something just because someone else hated it, if only to see, wow, what's so bad about this? And they may end up buying the thing, right? So I don't want to do that. So it's just a personal rule of mine that I basically, if we're looking at a 1 to 5 star rating, I tend to only want to review stuff that I would give 5 stars to, or at least like 4.5. So even something that I'd be like, oh, this is a 3 star, I probably don't want to talk about it on the show, because I just, you know, I don't want to do reviews every episode. I don't want that to be a segment that's on every episode, because I think reviews are one of those things that you start losing people, because even the listeners for this show, which is a fairly targeted audience, right? You know, unless you're interested in that particular product, even if it is system neutral, like, you don't care, right? So I may, as soon as I start doing a review, I may be losing 50% or more of the listeners just because they don't care about that, you know, and I try to do things that are valuable for everybody. So I don't want to do them every single episode for that reason. And so, you know, just by the nature of that, there's only so many I can do. So I'd really like to do things that I really like. And the same thing with like inspirations. I'm not going to talk about a book that I'm like, it's not that great. I'm going to talk about a book I love or a movie I love. So, you know, that's where I'm coming from. So I have had people request that I review certain things in the past, and I've not done that. And I'm not saying that every time I haven't done it, it's because I didn't like the thing, but there have been times that I've been asked to review something by either, you know, someone who's related to that thing, or just someone that found it and would like me to talk about it. And I've just decided not to, because I can't give it a glowing review, and I don't really want to take the time if I can't give it a glowing review. So I hope that makes sense. But I just want to put that out there. You know, I really try to stick with things I really like when it comes to talking about it on the show. All right, another idea for a segment Steve Ela has, and this is an interesting one. Random numbers of the day. A silly fun thing to do. Roll a D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, and D100, and read off the results in order as though you were calling out the lottery. Could be fun. That would definitely be easy for me to do. I have to say, as a producer, I'm always attracted to things that don't require a lot of work or time. So I could do it live quote, live on the show while I'm recording, right? So let me know if you think that would be cool. I don't know. What would you use those numbers for? I have no idea. Can you use that for Powerball or something? I don't know. I don't gamble. But yeah, let me know if people want me to do that. I will happily do that. Could be fun, as Steve says. Online RPG tips. A weekly tip for those trying to get started in online RPGs using tools like Roll20. I personally have a paid account, but I have not put aside the time to learn the interface. Tips would encourage me to try it out. All right, so this is a good one. I hear about this a lot from people, actually, especially Roll20, because people find out that I run games on Roll20 and they want to know how to do it. First of all, I will say I'm not a Roll20 expert. There's a lot of higher level features of that I don't use, partly because you have to be a paid member of Roll20 to use, and I'm not, and partly just because it would take a lot of time to learn how to use those and time to set them up, and it's like I already spend a lot of time, more than a lot of people do probably, preparing for my games, and to add hours to my prep just to set up things like dynamic lighting and API crap. It's just not worth it to me. Personally, when I ran Numenera online, we used Google Hangouts. We didn't even use the dice roller app for Google Hangouts. People rolled their own physical dice at their own table. We didn't have a virtual tabletop. If I had a piece of art or a map or something, I would screen share to show that to people for a few seconds, and that was it. And otherwise, we were just looking at each other on a Google Hangout. And since I started running D&D, I've gone to Roll20 because of the more complicated dice mechanics. I was like, well, it'd be nice to have macros so we can roll with advantage and stuff. And also, I was running these published adventures that have maps. So I'm like, well, it'd be nice to actually be able to use the maps and people can move around on the maps and stuff. But I have to say, I've been doing that for over a year now. I much prefer gaming on Google Hangouts. For me, it's much closer to the experience of gaming around a table than Roll20. Unfortunately, on Roll20, and I assume it's the same on Fantasy Grounds, I don't really know, but you start to get into the game of moving squares and miniatures and crap, which I really don't care for. I'd much rather do theater of the mind. And to the point where I've been really kind of missing playing on Hangouts and kind of wanting to go back to that for D&D, just because I'd be like, I'd much rather play on Hangouts and do theater of the mind. People can roll physical dice and I'll just trust them to be honest. We lose so much time on Roll20 between people having to deal with the macros and rolling the dice on Roll20 and moving their stupid little miniatures around on the grid, and just problems with the voice communications and video on Roll20, which is not to say Hangouts is perfect either, but it just seemed like we had a lot less problems. So I've had a lot of people ask for help with Roll20. I have done a couple tutorial videos on how to set it up and the macros and stuff, which you can find on my YouTube channel. But this is something, there definitely seems to be a desire for this. So the thing is I think when it comes to talking about how to use Roll20, I don't think doing that on a podcast works. I think to really do that well and to have it be at all useful to you, I need to do a video so you can see my screen. You can see what I'm doing. I can show you things visually. And, if you go look at the couple tutorials I've done on YouTube, they're not super well produced. They're not super long, but they took forever to make. Just videos are so much more time consuming to make than an audio podcast and the editing and whatnot. So I'm willing to do it, but it would be a huge undertaking to really do it well and to kind of go beyond what I've already done. So I need to know that a lot of people want that. So if you're interested in YouTube tutorials on playing online, I can do it with Roll20. I can do it with Hangouts. Let me know if there's enough interest. It could be something I could set up as maybe a milestone for the Patreon, because it does take so much time. Like, I kind of have to justify, because that time's got to come from somewhere, right? So it's going to come from time I spend on the podcast, or time I spend on my game development or writing, or time I spend on my part-time jobs. So I have to justify that. So it could be a milestone goal for Patreon if enough people want that. So let me know. Let me know if you're interested in something like that. As far as Fantasy Grounds, that's probably not going to happen. I'm sorry, but unlike Roll20, Fantasy Grounds is not free, and Fantasy Grounds is actually crazy expensive, at least for me. If you're in a position where you can look at Fantasy Grounds and be like, oh, that's cheap, I can handle that, I'm jealous of you, frankly. I wish I was in a position where I could think that. But for me, it's ridiculously expensive and just not worth the cost to turn my game even more into the kind of game I don't like. But I do know one thing nice with Fantasy Grounds is you can share. It's more like an actual tabletop than Roll20 is, where you can share documents and stuff. Well, you can do that on Roll20. Actually, I'm not sure about that. I haven't used it because, again, it costs a buttload of money to use. And the other thing is I have to learn it. It's a whole nother UI. And from what I've seen and what I've heard about Fantasy Grounds is it's not a great UI. I've seen videos of people using it. It looks really like something from the 90s. I hear there's a pretty steep learning curve for it. And it's like, I dumped so much time into learning Roll20, and, I don't really want to lose that much time just to learn another virtual tabletop that, just looking at it, I'm like, I don't think it's as nice as Roll20. It looks outdated, and it's really expensive. Even if somehow I got a free copy of it, and I was able to play for free, and my players were able to play for free, because either you're on Fantasy Grounds, either your GM is paying a butt ton of money so everybody can play free, or all the players have to pay money, which, yeah, I know all the rules are in there and whatever, but it's just not worth it to me because I bought the physical books. It's like I have to buy the books twice. So anyway, I don't want to rant against Fantasy Grounds. I know there are people that love it. And again, if you're in a position where you can use it and you like it, that's awesome. And honestly, if I weren't a podcaster, if I was making, six-figure salary, I'd use it. I don't know. But from where I'm at now, it's just not practical or useful to me. So yeah, Fantasy Grounds is probably out, but Roll20 and or Hangouts or, playing over Skype or something like that is something I could do. I could also talk about, how I stream, if that's something people are interested in. So let me know. All right, boy, I feel like I just got on a huge tangent. Okay, another segment idea from Steve. Poll Vault, and that's poll, P-O-L-L. Put up some polls on Google Plus or Facebook. Yeah, it's not going to happen on Facebook. I don't like Facebook, but I could do it on Google Plus and read off the results like the weekly sports game. In a matchup of elves versus orcs, the orcs come out on top 25-14. Keep them a simple choice like that with no discussion. Just pick your favorite. So yeah, I've actually thought about doing polls just as a way to try to get more feedback from you on episodes, doing something a bit more, extensive than who would win between an elf and an orc. And occasionally I do polls for the show, like how long would you like the episodes to be? Which, by the way, this one's going to be super long. No one's going to like this episode. It's too long, but what are you going to do? It's my 100th episode, give me a little flack. And I get some responses to those, but yeah, let me know if you want me to do a poll like that. Let me know, and also give me ideas for because if I'm going to do that, I'm going to need lots of ideas from you as to what questions to ask in those polls. But yeah, that's something I could do. That could be fun. All right, so great ideas here. Again, let me know if there's any of these you really like. Let me know. GameMastersJourney@gmail.com.
Hello, Lex. Long-time listener from New Zealand. I've been listening to the podcast since way back near the start of the GM Intrusions. Despite the fact I bought the book and I listened to the podcast, never actually ended up playing a game, but I did enjoy listening to it because there's a lot of really good advice I could plug into all the other systems that I play. Now, since the podcast moved to a more system agnostic arrangement, that made things a whole lot more interesting, and you were hitting D&D about the same time as I was getting back into it. So congratulations on episode 100, and hopefully I'll be making a very similar speech in episode 200. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks so much for the feedback. Awesome stuff. I'm so happy we have at least one New Zealander in our community. That is so cool. Actually, I'm pretty sure there's at least a few New Zealanders in the community that I've seen commenting on Google Plus and whatnot. So thanks so much, Jeremy. I'm glad that you stayed with me in the transition from GM Intrusions to Game Master's Journey. I have no idea how many people I lost there because, of course, I don't hear from the people that left. But yeah, I really agonized over that decision for quite a while before I ended GM Intrusions because I had such a great community around that show. But ultimately, there's only so much I could say about one game. And I really, I was really getting into D&D. I really wanted to talk about D&D. I was really getting into Star Wars. I wanted to talk about that. And I kind of felt like I'd said everything about Numenera and the Strange that I could really say. And I tell you what, they say hindsight is 20/20. And looking back at the last year of, what's come out from Monte Cook Games, I know now I made the right decision because the Strange is a fine game. And I know there are lots of people that love the Strange and, that's awesome. But for me personally, it didn't really grab me. Numenera, on the other hand, I love Numenera. So, I think the show, if I would have continued it, would have continued to be mainly focused on Numenera with occasionally stuff about the Strange. But, looking at like what's come out for Numenera since I ended GM Intrusions, it's like not much. There's like the second map glimmer. There is a glimmer of a couple glimmers of like short little adventures, I think. There was the Weird Discoveries book of short adventures, Into the Night, and now the ocean one. I forget what it's called. And like that's it. And that would have not been enough to keep me going for a whole year of weekly podcasts. So yeah, I think it was a controversial decision. I know that not everybody was happy about it, but it was definitely the right decision for me and for the show. And I'm always happy when I hear from people that found me back in the GM Intrusions days and continued on to Game Master's Journey and are still listening to the show. And I'm really happy when I hear from people that aren't playing D&D, because I know I talk about a lot of D&D lately just because that's what I'm playing. That's what I'm running, But I try really hard to, have content that will be of value to people who aren't playing D&D. So it always makes me happy when I hear from people that aren't playing D&D, but still listen to the show and still get stuff out of it. So thank you, Jeremy, for the feedback. All right. So I want to just take a moment here to send a huge thank you and a shout out to my tier 6 patron, Mr. Steve Strickland. Yeah. Woo. Cheer for Steve. You the man. So I have a Patreon on patreon.com/Starwalker Studios. And that's a great way that you can support the show, keep me going, and build this show up to more. There are some cool perks that you can get for being a patron and for supporting the show. Some of those include a special monthly podcast that I do just for the patrons. You can get access to original game material that I come up with, which is going to just keep getting better. I started that last month, so there's a few things up there now, but every month I'm going to be adding more. And this is a way that I can grow the show. So Patreon has milestones, which are kind of like stretch goals on Kickstarter, where when the Patreon overall for Starwalker Studios hits certain points, certain things happen. So the next milestone coming up is where I do live recordings of the show that you can participate in, and that will be video as well as audio. And the next stretch goal after that is actual play. And I really, really, really want to hit both of those. Like the sooner the better, because those are both things I want to do. But again, I have to justify the expenditure of time that those require. And again, another possible stretch goal could be doing tutorial stuff about, playing with Roll20, playing with Google Hangouts. how to role play online, how to stream, even how to podcast if people want to know about that. Anything I know how to do, how to play trumpet. I don't think I could do that on a video. Maybe, I don't know. But let me know. That could be a possible stretch goal as well. So check out my Patreon at patreon.com/Starwalker Studios. And thank you to all the patrons for your support. All right, we've now reached the main segment of the show. And before you freak out too much, this is not going to be the bulk of the show today. Actually, the main segment today was really the feedback portion that we got through. And again, thank you to everyone that submitted feedback. This is going to be the part of the show normally where I would talk about, the topic for the day. I'm going to try to have all the segments of a given episode kind of follow a theme, which will be around the main topic. So this would normally be where I would talk about that main topic, or it could be an interview in some episodes. But again, for this episode, the main topic was really all your great feedback. So I'm going to try and keep this shorter this time around. And I thought what I would do in this segment today is to give you a peek at some of what I've got planned for season 6 and beyond. So I've had numerous requests for more world building episodes. So I'm definitely going to be doing more world building episodes for sure. And in addition to that, I'm going to have actual episodes that are just world building for a whole episode. But I'm kicking around the idea, in addition to that, to having a world building segment, maybe in every episode. So, in the episodes that aren't a bona fide world building episode, I could have a shorter world building episode segment where I just do something quick. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. So I kind of talked a little bit about this before, but in regards to the world building, I'm looking for ideas for things to tackle in my world building process. And I got this idea from DM Nell from his feedback that he sent in that you listened to a while ago. So I've made a post in the subreddit for Primordia for this. I'll have it linked in the show notes. And there you can submit ideas for things that you'd like to see me work on. So, for example, DM Nell wondered, who's my Elminsters and my Mordenkainens in the world? Who are those iconic NPCs? What are some of my iconic magic items or artifacts like Excalibur or Stormbringer? So that kind of thing, like specific questions that I can answer. Those will be great prompts for me to have some direction, not only to just kind of help me get going on the world building and have something to focus on, but also so that I'm providing the stuff that you're interested in. Instead of doing a long, boring thing about the currency of Elandria that no one cares about, I can talk about artifacts and everybody's like, yeah, that'd be kind of cool. So I can say I already have at least one, or no, I take that back. I've already have at least 3 kind of iconic NPCs in my world that I can definitely talk about in future episodes. 1 or 2 of them, I have to decide how much or if I want to talk about them because they're very much involved in the story of my world right now, and I might not want to spoil that. But there's 1 of them I can definitely talk about. And I do have at least 1 iconic magic item. It's either a legendary magic item or an artifact. I'm still kind of tinkering with it, and I have a feeling it's going to end up being an artifact that I can talk about. And one idea that I had recently for topics that I can talk about in the world building episodes and or segments is I want to and I need to flesh out my city of Elandria more. So I am very much taking a bottom-up approach in my world building, which is to say, instead of going top-down, which is where I start with a map of the world and drill down from there, I'm starting very small with the city of Elandria and building out from there. And the idea is I want for myself as a DM running in this world to have what I need to run a campaign in the world as soon as possible. If I do the bottom down approach, macrocosm to microcosm, I'm going to be world building for weeks, months, maybe years before I'm to the point where I can actually run a game. Where this way, I start with an adventure area and expand out from there, and I can start running right now. And I've already run some stuff in Primordia. So I really want to flesh out the city of Elandria more. So I could do a whole series of episodes about the city because there's a lot going on in the city. The city could be a campaign setting all by itself, right? Other things coming up in season 6, I'm going to have more interviews. I've got an awesome interview coming up in episode 101 with a YouTuber who YouTubes about D&D. And if you pay attention to my Google Plus and my Twitter, you probably already know who this person is because I've been ranting and raving about, I guess not ranting, I've been raving about his channel lately because I love it. And he was kind enough to talk to me. So that'll be coming out next week. And I'm really excited to get that interview out to you. I think John Marvin's going to be coming back for at least one more episode. I've been talking with him, and John's a great guy. And he was just on episode 99 talking about stealing from 13th Age, taking things like icons, the one unique thing, escalation die, taking it from 13th Age and using it in your game. And the thing you got to know about that is that was John's idea. John wrote me and was like, "Hey, Lex, I'd love to talk about this on your show." And I mean, John did the whole episode practically. He came up with the outline. He came up with, what we're going to talk about. And it was awesome. I love having guests that do that because John kind of did the episode almost all by himself. So we put out the episode and it was great. I think it was one of my favorite episodes ever on Game Master's Journey. Definitely one of my favorite episodes in season 5. Phenomenal stuff. And John writes to me after the episode comes out and he's like, "Man, I feel kind of bad. I feel like I was kind of monologuing through the whole episode because, well, I didn't really have a whole lot to say because I don't have any experience playing 13th Age. I've read the book. That's it. I've talked to people like John that play it, but that's it. I've never played it or run it myself directly. So I didn't really have much to contribute to a lot of it. And I like to, let the guests talk anyway. So I didn't have a problem. I was like, "What are you worried about, John? It's fine. This was your baby. This was what you wanted to talk about. And you had great things to say. And it was a really great episode." But John said, "Well, I'd like to do more of a two-way conversation." And he was talking more like what Ken and Robin do on Ken and Robin Talk About Stuff, which is another good RPG podcast. So John and I have been talking about some ideas of things that we can talk about together on the show. And I'm really excited to do that. But John's still doing his Kickstarter right now, which, go check out his Kickstarter, Gods and Icons, if you haven't. He's pretty busy right now. So we're going to get to it sometime in season 6. But I'm really excited to have him back. I also plan to do an episode or multiple episodes, as I already mentioned, about the cleric in D&D and why I don't think players play them so much and what I can do and maybe what we can do to make the cleric more attractive as an option to play. And then, as I've said, I'm going to have segments. So here are some of the segments I'm thinking about doing. And again, I'd love to hear from you. If there's certain segments you really like and you want to see me do them or do them more often, let me know. I want to do a monster of the week. Also, if you have ideas for names for any of these segments, because these are pretty pedestrian names right now, I'd love to do something more creative, but still descriptive, like what it is. So Monster of the Week, this would be similar to what I did on GM Intrusions, where I take a monster from a game, maybe D&D, maybe some other game, and I discuss it. Hopefully I can talk about how you can use this monster in other games other than the game it came from, how you can use it tactically and strategically as a dungeon master, how to play it in combat, how to play it in role playing, and maybe even how you could base an adventure or even a whole campaign on this monster. There are monsters in D&D that you can totally build a campaign around, like a Lich or the Tarrasque. How to describe it, how to role play it. So yeah. And if you have ideas of monsters you'd like to hear me talk about in this segment, also let me know. Inspiration segment, I already talked about that in the feedback. Books, movies, TV shows that you can use for inspiration in your game. A review segment where I can review games and game products. antagonists and protagonists. So in GM Intrusions, this was like Monster of the Week and this were like one thing, but I think it'll be two separate segments. And antagonists and protagonists is about NPCs, where I'm going to ask you to help me create NPCs for Elandria and or Primordia and for you to use in your game. So here's what I'm thinking for this. Okay. I'll give you a prompt. Okay. In an episode, which might be, let's make merchants. Let's make some merchant NPCs, merchants you might find in Elandria. Okay. Or members of the Thieves Guild, or aristocrats, or beggars, things like that. So I'll give you some kind of prompt of a type of NPC. And then what I would like is for you to come up with an NPC that fits that. So if I'm asking for members of the Thieves Guild, come up with a thief, description, personality, how would you role play this character, goals, motivations, what's this character out trying to do, things like that. And then in the following episode, I will share those with everyone. So now I've got NPCs I can use in my game, and you've got NPCs you can use in your game, because, I'm going to kind of tie this in with the world building. So it's going to be Primordia focused. But, just because we're coming up with merchants for Elandria doesn't mean you can't use them in whatever campaign setting you're playing in, or even in a totally different game or a totally different genre, right? If you're playing science fiction, there's still merchants, right? And for me, the most challenging part of coming up with a good NPC is, their description, what do they look like, what do they act like, how do I role play them, what's their personality, what's their voice. That's the hard stuff. And all of that, it doesn't matter what setting you're in. It doesn't matter what genre you're in. So you could take a merchant from D&D and take that merchant, what they look like, their personality, how you role play them, their voice. And you could use that in Star Wars. You could use it in Numenera. You could use it in anything, because that stuff you can totally just use whole cloth. And then you can just reskin the things that are fantasy or science fiction or whatever. So this is already a long episode, so I'm not going to do that this week, but that's something I want to do in the future. So if you have ideas if you just already have some cool NPCs you want to send me, GameMastersJourney@gmail.com, you can totally do that. And or if you have ideas for classes, and by class, I don't mean character class, but types of NPCs that we could focus a segment on, like merchants or thieves or sailors or whatever, let me know. And finally, if you have an idea for a cool segment for the show, let me know. I'm not committing to doing every segment in every episode. I'm going to rotate them around as I have material. So I can always add new segments. And if there are segments that just kind of people aren't into, I can get rid of segments that aren't working. So if you have any ideas, let me know. And, which segments I do and how often I do a given segment will largely depend on how inspired I am with material for that and how much people are digging it and give me feedback on it, and things like the NPC segment, how much material I'm getting. So as I hope has become clear in this episode, I really value your support and your feedback and your contributions as a listener. And I really want to build the community around Game Master's Journey where we can all put our heads together. We can all share ideas. We can all help all of us become better GMs. I'd love to hear from you. Feedback, comments, suggestions, ideas, anything. And there are a lot of great ways you can get a hold of me. You can email me at GameMastersJourney@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter @LexStarwalker. You can follow me on Google Plus +LexStarwalker. Those are great ways to stay up with news on the show. Go to the website, StarwalkerStudios.com. You can find the show notes there. You can find all my podcasts there. You can find all the ways that you can help support the show there. Join the Game Master's Journey Google Plus community. It's a great place to share ideas and get to know other gamers in the community. Also, if you do the Reddit thing, head on over to the Primordia subreddit at reddit.com/r/Primordia. And if you have any ideas about world building in Primordia, that's a great place to go for that. And finally, I have a YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/Starwalker Studios. You can find my actual play videos there. When we get to the point that I'm doing live videos of the podcast, you'll be able to find those there, as well as any tutorials I've done and will do in the future. I am constantly striving to make this show even better. However, the real magic of the show lies with you. Please help me to make Game Master's Journey all that it can be. I think that the potential for this show, what this show could really be, is way beyond what we've seen so far and maybe even what we can imagine. But I can't do it without you. The best way that you can help me in this endeavor is to get involved. Send me feedback, send me ideas, send me suggestions. Another great way to help build the show is to share it with your friends. There are a lot of podcasts out there, and it can be really challenging to find the ones that you really like. So if you think this is a quality show that others will enjoy, tell your friends. You can also leave a review on iTunes and or Stitcher. You can share the episodes on social media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, a great way you can support the show is to become a patron. You can find my Patreon page at patreon.com/Starwalker Studios. Other great ways that you can help me keep the lights on here at the Obsidian Monolith is I have an Audible Books trial offer. You can get a free book and free 30 days of Audible. You can find the details of that at the bottom of the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. I also have an Amazon referral link down there. You can click on that to take you to Amazon and then buy whatever you want to buy. There's no extra charge, but it helps me out a lot. And there's also a donate button on the website where you can just make a one-time donation. All right, we're finally in the home stretch here for episode 100. I apologize to those of you that don't like long podcasts. This is not the norm. This is not going to be the norm. But I got a lot of feedback from people. There's a lot of stuff I wanted to cover today. And it's the 100th episode. It's kind of a big deal, especially since this is my first podcast to get to episode 100. So I'm pretty excited, if you can't tell. So I want to thank Kevin Loaded Dice from the Whiskey Rebellion podcast, Michael from the RPG Academy podcast, NPC Chris from the NPC podcast, or NPC cast, sorry, DM Nell, Thomas Chapman, Simon Collins, Steve Ela, Zeroth Zion, Steve Strickland, Matthew Hayden, Jeremy Gray. Thank you for helping make this episode awesome. I am so excited about this episode. It's so cool. It's so much fun doing it. I want to thank all the patrons for your continued support. Could not do it without you. Thank you so much. And finally, I want to thank you, listener, for listening to the show. Please let me know what you think. If you have ideas for topics, segments, or you just want to say hi, shoot me an email, GameMastersJourney@gmail.com. So I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I will be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. And until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.